All right, thank you, Drew. We will go ahead and begin the Climate Action Advisory Committee meeting for today. And I think the way we're going to do it, since we do have a few external locations, you may have seen that in the agenda that went out. These are noticed locations, so this is using traditional teleconference. So in the future, we're hoping to have Sonoma and Healdsburg. And just to try to cut down on some of the driving and make getting here a little better. So let's start with introductions, and let's begin in the room, and then we'll go to Sonoma. So I'll go ahead and start with Windsor.
Christopher Peck, Town of Windsor. Pete Gang, Petaluma.
Steve Keith, Roner Park.
Tyler Sobey, District 3.
Nick Thayer, Sonoma District 5.
Andy Schrader, Petaluma.
And Tanya Nara, SCTA, RCPA.
I'm Ross Clendenin, and then we'll go to other folks in the room here. We have
And I am Drew Nichols.
excellent, and then we will go to Sonoma.
Hi, everybody. Tom Conlon here, City of Sonoma, representing District 3.
Excellent. And I do not see anyone in Healdsburg right now, and I do not see any members of the public. Unfortunately, we are one down from a quorum after all of our rule changing. I'm just going to go ahead and blame the ribbon cutting. But I think that it's just approval of the meeting notes is the only action item. So if we agree to continue as a committee of a whole, we will do that.
Open this out.
I don't see any objections to that. So we will hold on the meeting notes. The next item 3.2 is the meeting schedule. Drew has printed those out. They have also been added to the RCPA and SCTA websites by the calendars. The big thing to note for CAAC is just that we are increasing our meeting frequency to bi-monthly. So it is theoretically 2 more meetings. And there are printed copies there. Does anyone have any discussion, question, comments on the meeting schedule?
Are all the meetings held here?
Theoretically, yes. They are, due to our being subject to the Brown Act, they are held in the boardroom. We're trying to expand by doing some more notice rooms and whatnot, but yeah, they are.
Are we going to continue doing this, the Healdsburg and Sonoma meeting rooms going forward for the year?
We would like to, if it works out, Drew's kind of set up relationships with administrative folks in both of those locations. And we could possibly look into some other ones. We just need to make sure there's someone there who's able to put up the agenda in advance, make sure there's a camera, something with audio set up. We'd like this kind of a pilot program. We haven't really done this with our other committees yet, but we understand that we're a big county and we want to make more options. Yes, Drew.
And then if I can also add on that, please let me know as early as possible. There is a bit of extra legwork on staff to do this, which I'm happy to do, but give me a heads up, I'll do it.
Yes,
Yeah, I noticed that sometimes the meeting just before the board of directors, sometimes after the board of directors. And so that was a concern in the past that if we have something to input in that meeting, we're kind of missing the mark because it will be another, and probably the report that we look at will be represented already before the meeting. So that is just something to notice that again, yeah.
Sure. Well, I'm hoping that the meeting frequency increase will help that a little bit. Also, when we come up with the agendas, we're really trying to see what's going to need to go to the board after that. So we're trying to be very conscious and that is one of the changes we also made in the charter. There was that old language that CAAC does not make recommendations. We have removed that. So you know, there will be some cases where, you know, we're able to give some direct input to the board when appropriate. Any other comments in the room or online on the schedule? Seeing none, we will move forward to item 3.3, and that is just to let everyone know that the next meeting, which is on March 14th, we are going to be holding elections for chair and vice chair of this committee for the first time. So this will be my last last meeting chairing it. We'll have someone else taking care of doing it, depending on who gets voted in. You know, the question about responsibilities, you know, mainly it is running the meetings, keeping the meetings going, although we do consult with the chair to help develop the agenda and just make sure everything kind of fits. So there's a little bit of extra communication. And would they present to the board in some cases if there was a recommendation?
Potentially, I'm trying to think how we've done it with the
Yeah.
CAAC. I think usually it comes through staff as part of the recommendation to the board, but yeah, we could certainly
Yeah.
talk about that.
But the main thing is running the meeting, and I think, you know, it would be just making sure that folks attend here, and certainly the vice chair is the backup. So if anyone has interest in that role, think about it, and we will be doing a vote at the next meeting, and we'll get that locked in. And then the next item, we will go to report outs from CAAC members by jurisdiction. We've moved this forward. We used to do this at the end. However, there was often some good information that got kind of squeezed and kind of passed by. So we'd like to make sure there's time if folks have any announcements or requests for collaboration or anything like that. So we'll go ahead and open it up and see if anyone has well, we can go by jurisdiction again, I suppose, starting with Windsor.
Yeah, I don't have anything at the moment. Pass.
Okay. All right. Okay. Me, Petaluma. Not much to report. I was going to talk about the smart station opening, but everybody seems to know about that. With a little bit of help, I organized the 3rd annual Petaluma Holiday Lighted Bike Ride, which took place on December 20th. In a way, it was just a fun, trivial event, but in my thinking, it helps get people excited, interested in alternative transportation. For me personally, as a longtime climate person, I've chosen to focus on transportation related things, partly because I like to ride my bicycle and because transportation emissions represent such a huge percentage of our overall contribution. And I'll just say one other thing very briefly. At last night's at a climate commission meeting in Petaluma, there was a breakout of an ad hoc focused on transportation, land use, and natural resources, I think. And there was a little bit of discussion about how, for all of our jurisdictions, we need, or we are in the process of changing the paradigm or the lens through which we look at our streets and our roadways, because we've all grown up with this idea that streets are for cars. And we have to get past that and start looking at our streets as places, public places, to be inhabited and used and enjoyed by everybody, including people in cars. So I just see that it's a big paradigm shift that is underway. I know that was well more than 1 minute.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's okay.
How many people participate?
300.
Just say, okay, I'll lead with that.
Yeah.
And footnote, it was a really cold, dreary day. And I think a lot of people decided who might have chosen to come along, decided to bag it because it was kind of raw.
Still a percentage of the population.
Yeah.
Excellent. Zito? any-
Yeah, so RCPA staff came to Sebastopol to do a presentation at the climate committee, and we appreciate that. And I think there's something on the agenda to do something integrating that with other cities, and if I understood it. So that was great. Sebastopol is still going through the financial crisis, and staff support for climate has diminished. So we have less hours, we don't have minutes, and so that's a struggle. We're trying to reconfigure the committee a bit, like make it smaller, maybe more effective. I think the biggest challenge is to get city staff take us seriously, because a lot of the development projects that are prepared in city go to the planning commission, and we never see them until we read it in the paper. So that is something, I don't know whether other cities have that problem. The question is how to make a climate committee part of a regular workflow and evaluating of the future of the town, and not just bypass it and work only with design review, planning commission, etc.
For Sebastopol for now. And Steve Keith for Roner Park.
Yes, Roner Park, next Tuesday's meeting, council meeting, we'll receive a report on the active transportation plan and discuss and give direction. I plan on commenting. I'm currently vice chair of the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. But fortunately, staff and as well as the current council are pretty excited about it. And have a number of projects, some of them even, fairly challenging, but they seem to be, behind it. And also we're starting to develop a relationship with the local school district to discuss, encouraging active transportation amongst the students.
And Tyler.
I am going to talk about SMART. I'm very excited about the Petaluma station finally opening. I take the train almost the entire way from Cottingtown down to Larkspur for work. And not a lot of folks getting on at that stop yet, but hopefully the ribbon cutting will fix that. I would just encourage everybody to use the train, to post it on social media. Every time I go, on a weekend, I go take the train with my kids and take the ferry and stuff. It's like $1.50, they've got the bicycles now. They've got the Connect, which we took with my father-in-law because he has COPD. So we took the van. That was $1.50. Just for me, he was free. And post your pictures and share, because SMART's going to have to re-up for I guess their funding source, and it's something we can't afford to lose here with all the momentum they've got.
So, Nick, anything for District 5?
Yeah, I actually wanted to talk about something that ties in perfectly with what your name is Pete, with what Pete brought up, which is roadkill. I think that a study of roadkill in the county would be very squarely within the purview of the RCPA and the CAAC. I know nationwide, more than 1 million animals become roadkill every single day in the US. And that has enormous ecological, financial, cultural impacts. And there are one of the things that is brought and so basically one of the big solutions to that is wildlife crossings. And there's a really, really big and expensive one that has recently moved forward near LA somewhere. I forget what it's called. Okay. That's kind of the poster child for wildlife crossings right now. But I want to specify that they don't all need to cost, what was it, $290 million or something like that, for this one, because that's going across a super highway or whatever. But they don't all need to cost that much. There are very low cost solutions that drastically reduce roadkill. And I think that it would be great to get a study of roadkill in Sonoma County specifically, and of potential mitigation measures.
Excellent. Tanya, do you know if there's anyone's looked into any of that?
Not that I know of, no.
Well, there is, so the Newt Brigade,
Yes.
certainly
Yeah.
keeps tabs on one species. And in fact, it was my sixth graders' science homework this week was reading an article by the wonderful Mary Callahan and the Press Democrat about the Newt Brigade and the work they do. So, but for more animals, it's fascinating.
Oh yeah, deer, squirrels, raccoon. We don't really think about those animals as being necessarily ecologically important. But it does add up.
So is there a database or a map of the county that?
There are some people who study this. I'm not up to date on good sources. I was listening to a podcast actually called The Golden State Naturalist. Wonderful podcast. But they did an episode specifically about wildlife crossings because of the big one happening in LA. They were just kind of capitalizing on the media presence that already had. But they, yeah, there are people who study this, so I can't link to anything specifically right now, but there is data out there.
So there's this county service that removes the animals?
Yeah, I mean,
And they don't keep notes, or they don't?
oh, I don't know. I think that would be really interesting to find out. I know at various times I have seen Recology and Sonoma Animal Services picking up roadkill. So yeah, I imagine somebody at the county level is keeping tabs on that.
Hi there. I was just doing a little bit of on the spot research. It looks like the last major statewide report was done in 2016, which was a statewide report, and it seems like the lead on statewide that's doing this type of research is a volunteer effort out of UC Davis. UC Davis Road Ecology Center, and they have a statewide volunteer program, or the California Roadkill Observation System. And so I think that would be where we would want to look for statewide and then countywide numbers. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
Well, thank you. Go ahead.
I think that's a great idea. I was really involved in the Annenberg crossing, and the Wildlife Conservation Board has funded my South LA County Wildlife Habitat Connectivity Master Plan. So that's really interesting. Anyway, a different conversation for a different time. First, I want to acknowledge the Annenberg crossing actually wasn't at risk yesterday of getting burned down. And I just want to acknowledge what's happening in LA. I know a lot of people who have lost their homes, and I've been working all week to help protect Topanga Canyon. So it's fucked up, if I can say that in a public room. Anyway, to Petaluma, we did the Purple Cup pilot, which is infamously plastic. We don't love the plastic part, but some multinational corporations are really paying attention because it actually went pretty well. Cool Petaluma has launched a reusables pilot with restaurants and coffee shops across Petaluma to fill the void now that the Purple Cups have left, and before they come back, a bring your own container pilot, and it's starting to pick up speed. It's got restaurant owners giving testimonials and putting it out on their social media. So it's cool. Watch this space for more.
Excellent. Then jump to Sonoma, see if Tom has an update.
Okay, hi, everybody. I'll quickly give an update on Sonoma, and then I'll talk a little bit about just some District 3 matters as well. Sad to hear what's going on in Sebastopol and the struggles that they're having with budget matters. Sonoma, of course, is in better shape right now. We're starting to move forward on climate action with our ad hoc committees are up and running. So we have several, one working on grants, one working on transportation, buildings, education and outreach. I may be forgetting a fifth, trees and corridors. So the work between our meetings is actually quite productive. We also now have a new staff member working in the planning department that's directly supporting these ad hocs. And we've met this week, several meetings to prepare for our February meeting where we really plan to get a good start to the 2025 year. We still don't have budget in place dedicated to climate action in the city of Sonoma, but we're working toward that objective in this year's budget negotiations. And I can say that we've had, we're looking, as I spoke at the last meeting, we're looking into the cost effectiveness of our current investment in Sonoma Clean Power Evergreen, which of course is a very expensive thing our city is doing with its municipal accounts in return to the city for the investments made. We hope to have Sonoma Clean Power send a representative to our February 13, I believe it is, commission meeting in Sonoma to discuss that matter. And we're having some preparatory discussions in anticipation of that. Looking for, frankly, a good solution that benefits all the jurisdictions throughout the county to the issues that we're raising about cost effectiveness of Evergreen. What else can I say about city business? We've also begun a climate smart tourism coordination with our local tourism promotion community, and that seems to be moving along well. I don't have any specifics to report, but tune in our February meeting where I hope to hear more from that ad hoc. We did have our alternative transportation plan. It's in the process of being finalized, and that will go before our Board of Supervisors, I believe, next Wednesday. I'm sorry, our City Council next Wednesday. And I think that's enough on City of Sonoma business. Just on the issues raised by others, I appreciate the conversation about wildlife crossings. Last night, I just read in one sitting Ned Hoke's short fiction book, Open Throat, which is dedicated to the mountain lion P22. Fascinating little read and very much a climate message, particularly in this era of fire. I encourage everybody to read that short book. I got it out of the library. I will return it. I promise to return it to the county library soon.
What's the name of the book?
The book is Open Throat. And it starts out with, I haven't ever eaten a person, but I might today. Written from the perspective of a mountain lion. District 3, some other, the issue of smart train. I had a great conversation with Supervisor Chris Corsi about trying to make sure we can pull the community together in support of an extension to the smart train sales tax, which of course the whole system is dependent on. Our perspective down here in the city of Sonoma, which does not have access right now in any meaningful way to the smart train, is that we need to work on that interconnectivity. And so I'm hoping that the community can support those of us in the county, perhaps also in Marin County, who don't have easy access to the smart train and yet are paying for it. So I look forward to further discussions about that to be sure that we can bring the community together, because right now, if I'm honest, we don't have a lot of smart support here in Sonoma Valley for extending that sales tax. Particularly when you consider the current proposal from SMART to build all the way to Cloverdale, which is going to be very expensive. And according to the MTC, is one of the least cost-effective investments in the entire Bay Area for transit. So it's a continuing problem I hope that we can work on and come up with solutions to countywide. Obviously, down here in the south part of the county, we're monitoring State Route 37 and sea level rise issues. There'll be a big meeting on that next week, I think the 14th. The planning committee for that project. And of course, SMART has no plans yet to elevate the tracks in that area. So it's another concern of ours in the South County. So that's enough for me. Thanks for the opportunity to check in.
Thank you, Tom. And I don't see any members of the public. So we will proceed to the next item, which is, this is a proposal, collaborative implementation proposal. And basically this is, RCPA CAAC is kind of a big part of it is local collaboration. That's kind of a key part of what this committee does. So we'd like to provide some time for a couple of CAAC members to present an item for discussion. We really want to hear member feedback and possibly see how RCPA and partners and jurisdictions could potentially get involved. So I'm going to turn it over to Andy Schrader and Pete Gang, who will be presenting, and then we'll have some time for discussion. So whenever you're ready, Andy, go ahead.
We're going to let Pete start by kind of framing the conversation. Drew is oh, there it is. Is that going to work? Oh, good. Wow, it didn't work yesterday.
Okay, I forgot that I was going to be introducing this, but I think I can conjure up a few words.
It's in your sleep.
Yeah. I think partly inspired or motivated by the fires in LA, yet another unprecedented natural disaster. I think all of us here understand that even though these fires may have been started by humans, it was climate change that created the conditions for them. We can't attribute any specific event to climate change, but generally we know that climate change increases the probability or likelihood of these events. And I guess my feeling these days is, from the reading and the research that I've done about climate science, I know that we collectively, we humans, have already put into the atmosphere so much CO2 and other greenhouse gases that we have increased the heat trapping capacity of the atmosphere by 50% over pre-industrial levels. There's more greenhouse gas equivalent now than at any time in the last 2 or 3 million years. And I think we all are in agreement with the idea that we need to maintain a planet with atmospheric conditions that are similar to the ones that gave rise to human civilization. And right now, we are out of that regime. And every day, every year, we're taking ourselves farther and farther out of those bounds. And it just astounds me that the general public is so slow to take notice. And we are the ones who we here in this room and others we have our attention focused on climate change, the climate crisis. And I think it's incumbent on us to up our game and do everything that we can imagine doing to bring these issues to the attention of the wider public. And I guess that's my intro to, or that's my feeling underlying these ideas that we wanted to bring up.
So thank you for hearing this today. Pete wanted me to give a little bit of my background for context. And then I think I'm going to tell a little bit of an origin story of Petaluma and Los Angeles's collaboration, just quickly. And so this is sort of our origin story on the importance of collaboration. So I'm Andy Schrader. I spent the last decade as Director of Environmental Affairs, Water Policy, and Sustainability for LA City Council member Paul Koretz. We were able to significantly move the needle on a lot of climate work. And we didn't do it alone. It takes a village, of course. But we were really involved in LA's 100% clean energy goals with NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab. We did building decarbonization. We did the LA City Biodiversity Index, the wildlife habitat connectivity stuff I mentioned. We did the Zero Waste LA initiative. We did a Healthy Soils initiative, a lot of local water policy, environmentally friendly purchasing policy. And we actually won a United Nations recognition for our good food purchasing policy. And we also launched the Climate Emergency Mobilization Office so that the city's climate work would be done through a justice first lens, so that indigenous, frontline, and labor communities who are the most impacted not only by climate change, but by climate policy making would be in leadership positions to guide that policy making going forward. So it should be noted that when we launched our Climate Emergency Mobilization Office, Berkeley noticed what we were doing and declared a climate emergency, invited us up. That's what really started the collaboration. Invited us up, and they invited us to their Bay Area Climate Emergency Town Hall. Berkeley was followed by Richmond and Oakland, and then every city in and the county of Sonoma. I think that's when Pete and I really started collaborating. And then the United Kingdom, and an avalanche of climate emergency declarations followed around the world. There was 3 before LA went, and now there's up to over 2,300 around the world. So that's also when then Petaluma Councilmember Delinda Fisher and I started collaborating. It worked both ways. We inspired the Bay Area's climate emergency declarations, and the North Bay inspired LA. Petaluma's gas station ban was published in newspapers around the world, and then we introduced legislation in LA. And the Chevron lobbyist was in my office so fast when we introduced our legislation. They were freaked out because they hadn't thought about that. And that's why this conversation is so important. We know that what happens in California doesn't stay in California, it echoes. It's so important, and it's imperative that we don't settle for the state of California's very slow and very late 2045 climate goals. We're already at the place where LA is burning to the ground. So people will follow our lead around the world. If we settle, they will settle. But if we get aggressive, they will get aggressive. So maybe the most important thing for the purposes of today, along with Petaluma and Irvine, my Cool LA team won the Cool City Challenge, aiming to help cities more effectively implement their climate action plans through intensive, focused community engagement, which introduced me to the Cool Petaluma team, and that's pretty much a direct line of how my family and I got up to Petaluma. So as Pete mentioned, and I think we all know the problem too well, especially this week, the Palisades fire is the big one that we've been expecting. I used to live in Topanga Canyon. I've got my colors on today. And we moved because I knew this fire was coming. and the house that we moved out of is in serious risk of burning down today. So dozens of people I know and tens of thousands that I don't have been evacuated, have lost their homes. So it's very real, and I mean, it's crazy what's happening. So, so the problem is, you know, all our jurisdictions have had their own climate challenges, the Tubbs fire, and you know, we've had floods and stuff. And the cities and the county responded by declaring climate emergencies and then setting really aggressive climate goals, 2030. But the problem is achieving those goals is really expensive, and nobody has capacity, nobody gives enough staff to it. The RCPA staff is doing great work, but not enough people are getting access to that work. So, so most jurisdictions have listened to their highly paid consultants and settled for the state's much weaker and slower carbon neutrality goals. 2045 is 20 years from now. Like if LA is burning to the ground right now, where are we going to be then? So, go.
Andy, I pointed out to Andy that when Jerry Brown put out his executive order in 2018 saying, directing the state to get to carbon neutrality, it was get to carbon neutrality as soon as possible and no later than 2045. And the way that's been interpreted is 2045.
We need to get Jerry out of his ranch and bare knuckling with us. And so this is the asterisk in the Petaluma blueprint, which reads implementation will depend on city council prioritization, city staff, and financial resources. It's truthful, but you know, that's not what we need. So this concept then is a conversation starter of how do we put together a more effective integrated messaging and action campaign, not only within Sonoma County, but maybe even partnering with our North Bay partners, you know, Sonoma, Napa, Marin, given that Senator McGuire represents the whole North Coast and talks about it a lot. You know, maybe eventually we bring in Mendocino and points north. And so this is part of a much larger vision. I'm going to pitch just a pilot version of this today, but to coordinate all of our climate efforts among all of our cities, especially the messaging and community outreach among all of our cities, agencies, and organizations working in the cities. And the RCPA staff I know is working on getting all the different climate action plans together and seeing where there's overlap, which is all of them are very similar. They're just worded differently. So we know we need to start with a bit of a pilot project. So Sonoma and Marin counties launched this effort in October called Mascots, the Marin Sonoma Coordinated Transit Service Plan. And I know it's weird that Marin is listed first when we know Sonoma should be, but so the goal is to better coordinate transit along the 101 corridor, improve the smart train service, and brings together all 6 North Bay transit agencies and 3 funding agencies. So our proposal is this: as the public messaging side of Mascots rolls out, instead of just coordinating among these transit agencies, we think that obviously all of our cities and counties should coordinate public education messaging efforts with them, but also the utilities, the water utilities, the electric utilities, school districts, and the NGOs who are working on the whole spectrum of climate issues. So create sort of a memo of understanding where for this quarter, we're going to focus on your transit issues. And then next quarter, Sonoma Water, we're going to focus on your water conservation efforts, and everybody's going to do it together. And then building decarbonization, et cetera, biodiversity. So then if we do this for 1 quarter each year, then each thing gets a spotlight, and then like emergency preparedness is part of that. That's highly in my mind right now. And if we do it this way, we can really maximize our scarce financial resources and scarce staff capacity, and most importantly, maximize our impact. So what would this look like in practice? We think we should start with a big region-wide civic pride volunteer day that's in alignment with the quarterly action theme to build awareness, civic pride, and a feeling of regional teamwork. So we're all in this together. Since this is transit oriented, we could, for instance, clean up the areas around our train stations and bike trails, something as simple as that. And that could be coordinated by some of the NGOs that are so effective in our cities. And so then here's our example of what one tightly coordinated public outreach and messaging can look like. Convene the various agencies, school districts, NGOs, utilities, and get agreement to working together towards these regional climate goals, which everybody is dedicated to the RCPA goals. So first we spotlight transportation and set some goals of like, okay, what do we want to get to in this quarter? Reduction of automobile trips, increased use of public transit, increased use of active transportation, increased carpooling, maybe even fit in reduction of airline trips and reduce greenhouse gases of that massive amount. So then from there, work with, figure out what the baseline, and I'm sure the transit agencies have this already. What are the baseline auto trips, transit usage numbers? Set goals. Do we want to reduce it by 5%? And then with all of those folks that I mentioned, launch a quarter-long regional education effort to the public about active transportation, transit workshops, system tours, and do really big experimentation. If the whole region knows that we're experimenting, like we're just trying this stuff out, then it kind of opens the door to think out of the box, pilot different transit times, pilot different ways of carpooling, ride your bike to work day, like get everybody in Petaluma to ride their bikes to work one day. And if you change your habit once and you see how easy it is and how fun it is, maybe you'll keep doing it. And then track, like we talked about, and this is why I love the roadkill study, track the other externality of pollution of automobiles. We heard last night in the Petaluma Climate Action Commission that plastic waste is a big part of the waste in the Bay, in San Francisco Bay, from car tires, because plastic is a big part of car tires. And I hadn't heard that before, and that's mortifying.
And in the Russian River.
In the Russian River. And then, roadkill, that's another externality of automobiles. Like how many animals get killed by bicycles? None. So then, right? So then also, brainstorming roundtables, book groups. Like if we really open it up to think outside the box, then it will happen. Like if you provide the space for it, people will do it. And then we could have film screenings, expert speakers from around the country on Zoom. We can do this around the world. And all of this with the goal of changing. Everything we do is just a bad habit. If we changed our habits to be good habits, we can reduce our greenhouse gases like that. So then at the end, you measure the habit changes. The winning cities that do the most get recognition. The losers actually win by getting more resources next time. So then the transit people go off, reassess efforts, and prep to do it for an entire quarter again next year when their turn comes up again. And that doesn't mean that like the water people don't work on their water stuff. It just means that the spotlight is on transit for this quarter. So then the way this works toward our 2030 goals, our climate action goals, the first year we have we aim for a reduction of 5% or something, whatever's reasonable since we're piloting this. Second year, try to reduce 10%, 10%, 10%, 10%. By the time we get to 2030, that's 55% reduction in vehicle miles. And that's huge. And that's like the step-by-step way that we can break this whole thing down and get somewhere without, and hopefully inspire others to join us. So after the pilot, this is kind of the bigger picture. We're thinking we could expand to all of our climate goal areas, have an annual quarterly focus on emergency preparedness, and then food and solid waste, building energy, and so forth. Then everything gets a spotlight and everything gets a focus from all agencies and all teams, and the whole region is learning this together and doing this together instead of all the different one-offs that are going on that are important, but they're not getting the spotlight that they need. So, as Pete mentioned, the whole region is already engaged in RCPA's leadership, and it shows up in their climate action plans. So what we're looking for today, really, we wanted to let you know about this, see what you think. And our ask is to see if your cities and other agencies and NGOs might want to join in a conversation about doing this together. Deb Fox, Petaluma's new climate manager, is interested in convening something like this to talk about it. And we could do it online, whatever is convenient. And then we'll, if everybody's interested, we'll figure out what kind of MOU or letter of intent might be necessary. But we really see this as a big opportunity to save money. Sebastopol's struggling financially. Like, how can we maximize their efforts too? And raise all boats, and most important, actually meet the climate goals that we've set. So we really have to do not what we think is possible with scarce resources, but what is actually necessary. Like, we need to make the impossible possible and achieve it. And we had this nice compliment from the Argus Courier a month ago. If only the world was following our lead, and they are. As I mentioned earlier with the climate emergency stuff, everybody's watching California. So, we could have cool Sonoma, cool Napa, cool Marin, cool Bay, cool California, cool Southwest. It's really up to cities to get this done. The international community is never going to come to a binding agreement. God knows Congress, I'm not even going to look at the words DC for the next 4 years. But if we do this at the city level, we can really get somewhere, and the municipality level. This is why I work on this stuff. These are my 2 kids. If I can get them to the year 2100 on a relatively stable planet with a stable climate, then I'll have achieved my life goal. And this is where to find me and Pete.
Thank you very much. Should we open it up for discussion if anyone has any feedback for Andy and
I
Pete?
just sort of tag on one thing. I forgot to mention that, but the cartoon that was in the first slide. That was Pete's cartoon. It was Mad Magazine cartoonist, 2 kids sitting in a classroom. Up on the blackboard is 2 + 2 = 4. And once one of the kids says to the other, how important can it be? I mean, how often does this come up in conversation? And I always think of that cartoon when I think about climate issues. I think for a lot of people in our wider community, at some level, they know about climate issues, climate change, climate crisis, but it so rarely comes up in conversation that they are allowed to forget it and just go about their lives oblivious. So one of the things that I'm most excited about, the whole package that Andy's presenting, is the big unified messaging. And when a company like Verizon wants to roll out a new product, they have a very well designed publicity marketing plan that using all kinds of media. And I think our interests would be really well served if we could at least get messaging out in a broad, holistic, concerted way.
Tyler.
First thing I would say is thank you for doing all the work on this and putting this together, and for the presentation. The kids are adorable. My youngest middle name is Cora. I used to be a journalist in Colorado. It stood for the Colorado Open Records Act, so a bit of a
The
Snuck that by my wife.
East Coast right now is called Core.
Yeah. And then I guess the other thing I would say is that I don't know how it's a money saver. Just to start off with, I mean, I attend Sonoma Marin Saving Water Partnership meetings as a representative from Marin Water. It's an extra meeting I go to quarterly and prepare for. And somebody at Sonoma Water puts together a social media toolkit quarterly. And one agency might reshare or repost. And our agency is always like, well, is it fitting with the campaign we're running right now? And, at the end of the day, this issue, I mean, it's the issue we're all aware of, is it takes political will, but it's going to be staff that executes it. And so it is going to take more resources. I like the ideas. I like the idea of coordinated messaging. But it will certainly take some convincing of boards at a water district to say, let's talk about something totally unrelated, especially if people are mad about their rates going up recently or something to that effect. I love the idea of civic pride days too. But I mean, do you envision this taking some dedicated staff? Or is there a home agency that would be responsible for the creation of some of this content? Do you foresee a separate board? Like, would this be a new Bay-wide board?
It goes to you, Andy.
And then, I don't like the winning cities. What about the winning agencies? I want my water district to win too. So, but I like the idea of competition. I love gamifying stuff. I also think if the the agencies that lose get more resources, everybody would want to lose because we all need a little bit more.
We don't tell them that.
We'll keep that in the fine print. So yeah, where do you think this is housed? Does it create a new agency? I mean, maybe the RCPA is a natural home for it, but since we are the leaders, like you said, and you certainly would have my support. I'd be happy to try to convince some folks if we wanted to do that. And then I think I would love to have another meeting to get more input and have more conversation together, because everybody's got a lot of interesting stuff to say.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Those are all great thoughts. I don't know what the organization looks like, honestly. I could make it up, but I'm not going to. I think there's an appetite, and I don't know how this has changed in the last week. Maybe I think the appetite has grown to fund bigger collaborative. A lot of the IRA funding was like, hey, if you bring together a new coalition, how can you, that will be more interesting to us to fund. And we've got our friend Jared Blumenfeld, who's overseeing a big foundation in San Francisco that we could bring this to, and have, if we say all the cities want to do this and the utilities want to do this together, and we just need some funds to execute it, I think we've got a good argument to, I don't think it takes a whole lot of staff to do this. But, they could possibly fund one or two that we place either at RCPA, who's already over capacity, or City of Petaluma, somewhere, or one of the NGOs. So I think it's doable.
The other comments,
Yeah, so when the SBA came to talk to us about I asked about adaptation. what are you doing for adaptation? And adaptation was kind of put at the end of the process. They hadn't gotten to it, if I remember correctly. So I believe that adaptation and mitigation have to be integrated. The public is mostly interested in how do we adapt to this situation. Mitigation has to do with worldwide emissions. Yeah, so the public doesn't see the value of reducing its own greenhouse gases when the rest of the world doesn't work together. So you have to pull in people through adaptation to get them interested and passionate about the whole picture. So you have in your quarter 3, you have emergency preparedness. That's not adaptation. That's, we live the normal way, but sometimes we have an emergency and we have to be prepared for that. Food needs adaptation. The food system needs to adapt. Not just to mitigate, but also to adapt. Transportation, similar. Right? This kind of adaptation, the kind of transportation we have in a hot climate will be different. So we need to think these things at the same time. And we need to do the adaptation, I believe, first, because that's how you pull the interest in of the people. It's only a minority of the people that can see that worldwide picture and feel energized to step up and do your little thing in Sonoma County. And we haven't really been able to energize the bigger population. Only the county right now is doing adaptation plans. And there's the flood plan, the fire plan. But again, they kind of done somewhere else. They need to be integrated in the activities of each city, integrated in their effort to mitigate. That's kind of my main point.
So this is a bigger conversation. The aim of this is really mitigation. I don't think it's possible to adapt to 100 mile an hour fire hurricane. So if we don't reduce our emissions, I feel like adaptation efforts are futile. But it's important to prepare for the future. I totally agree with you about the fragility of the food system. I've been tracking the global food supply for a long time, and it's COVID really showed us how fragile it is. So those are definitely important efforts. I don't think that this proposal is hoping to solve that, but and a lot of money is going to adaptation, but not enough money is going to mitigation, and not enough effort is going to mitigation. So that's really the focus of this.
Thank you. I'm going to go City of Sonoma and then to Roner Park there.
Great, thank you. Excellent conversation. Andy, thank you for bringing this to our attention, others who worked on this. I want to agree with some of Tyler's questions about the administrative, where this function would occur administratively and whether the funding would be sustainable. And in my mind, what I'm hearing is the need for coordinated outreach, coordinated messaging to audiences that have the ability to take action and change. I do think the Los Angeles fires have changed the conversation this week, and we're going to be in a post-LA environment for the rest of this year. So how do we respond to that moment? Because that's our responsibility as this body. But from an organizational standpoint and a funding standpoint, what I don't see the need for a redundant planning process, coordinated planning process. But I do see the need for coordinated outreach of the progress within all of the existing activities. There's a top-down versus bottom-up strategy, and we obviously need both. And Andy, I think you're coming at this from the perspective of local governments have the ability to get stuff done locally and face-to-face relationships, and a lot of the mitigation measures hit the ground in the local policies. And they need support, they need funding, and frankly, we need coordinated messaging so that we're not all reinventing the wheel. The state's well aware of these problems, and the state has been trying to do things like passing SB 375, requiring the regional planning, transportation planning agencies, land use planning agencies to do coordination at the regional level. A lot of times the cities are pushing back on that, saying, wait a minute, we don't want to be micromanaged by state entities. And you're hearing that on your own city councils, no doubt. But that's what it was. We need top-down coordination, but we also have bottom-up pressure and asks and commitment. So as I boil this down, I'm hearing the need for coordinated outreach. And there's some good outreach ideas. The quarterly events focus spotlight. I love that concept. We see, like in the mascots project that you referenced, we see an effort to do transportation coordination. Is the story going to get out to the potential transit riders about the progress that mascots already made in coordinating schedules and will be making over the next year? That is frankly questionable. If I lean back into my experience in the state energy efficiency program world, we had a very successful, fairly simplistic campaign called Flex Your Power. Some of you may remember Flex Your Power. I think it was funded at the time about $1 million, maybe as much as 25 million a year at the state level. And it really moved the needle to keep the power grid up during some tight times. So we know communications and messaging work when they're well designed. So we need state level funding, and we need local, we need saturation of local markets with that funding. The list could be very long. As Zeno has indicated, adaptation could be on this list too. And we're going to start to hear that coming out of the insurance crisis. But I think we need, to Andy's point, to stay focused on mitigation, and we need to be very strategic and prioritize the measures that we would want to qualify for regional outreach. I think transit and VMT reduction is key, and because of our transportation profile. So that should be at the top of our list, as it was on the list Andy presented. I think food has been largely left off the list, and we need to be starting to talk about public information campaigns that encourage dietary shift, food waste reduction, and compost recycling, things like that. So that enough for me, but I encourage this to move forward, but I do caution that we don't want this to turn into another silo or another administrative burden on staff as well as on the public who's inclined to participate.
Thank you, Tom. Then we'll go to Steve.
Thank you. Andy and Pete, for the time you put in to this presentation. I really appreciate that. A couple of things that I'm new to this group, second meeting here, but attending different meetings and paying close attention to some of the struggles that different agencies or communities have with addressing environmental concerns. Often it does come down to coordination. Even in our little town of Roner Park, there's a fairly extensive creek system with paths and stuff that go through the town. And within that path system, in any given space, there could be 3 different agencies that are responsible depending on what level. And trying to address something can be somewhat of a frustration, to say the least. So coordination, just even on a very local level, I think is something that we really should focus on and nail down if we really want to have some sort of success. I love the idea of Civic Pride Day. Especially like say you spoke about the first one of the quarters was transportation. I like the idea of perhaps incorporating transportation into that civic pride. We're going to go clean up an area, and by the way, we're getting there by smart. Perhaps there's a shuttle involved, and I think most of the public who is not aware, excuse me, is because they're driving past it. They're riding past it. They've got their headphones on. They have their blinders on. When they're out there and they're kind of, I wouldn't say necessarily forced to look at it, but they're engaged in it. That's what starts to change that perception and makes them more aware, and increasing that awareness. They'll share with their neighbors, their family members. That's beneficial to the cause. The quarterly events, just what was put up on, I'd imagine that is, a suggestion. I noticed that they don't repeat. I thought it would be a good idea that you want to continue to add in new concepts, but like the first quarter is going to be transportation. This year, then next year, it's going to be something else, but also a transportation recap or what successes we've seen over the last year, to keep that rolling, so it doesn't just kind of disappear.
And the thought was to have 5 topic areas, so that when it comes up next year, it's in a different season, so that we're hitting the topic area in like building electrification in the winter versus in the spring versus in the summer.
Right. No, okay. Great. That's awesome. That makes sense to me.
But then it doesn't come up that as often as it would, but it comes up pretty close.
Yeah, no, I love these types of discussions so it exposes my brain to a different perspective I hadn't thought about. So that's great. I feel like there was one more thing that I'm terrible at notes. The main thing is the coordination between agencies and especially addressing an environmental concern, like shopping cart in the creek. It's right there in the middle of Roner Park, but it's in the water. So Roner Park doesn't go pick it up. Someone else has got to. And they're not stationed in Roner Park. So things like that. It seems like that would be like a huge win to fix that kind of thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just another, if you will, that Tom helped with. And Pete, this goes back to your intro about how surprised we all are that people aren't taking it more seriously, aren't more aware of the climate crisis, or that it takes something like LA to make people wake up and pay attention. I do really like the idea of this, at least at the start, as a public messaging exercise in order to build support or momentum for real action steps that are maybe Bay Area wide. I think you could definitely get buy-in from people if you were like, we want to message your successes on climate, right? And then we're a great place to live, we're a great place to work, because we've done X on climate. I think there would be support maybe for that kind of thing, as well as joint messages surrounding the importance of taking action, or some of those scarier numbers that you brought up, and you have a tagline, climate forward, or whatever, you bring in a consultant maybe that helps iron that out. But Yeah, I think that would be a great start, and I'd love to, again, have a meeting where we can talk more about next steps and how you actually go about implementing something like this in a way that's manageable and sustainable, too. So.
Christopher. Yeah, I wanted to make a comment and then ask a question relevant to this. And this is a comment I've made many times, partly motivated by my own, home-based struggles to upgrade and seeing how that can leverage out. And part of it has to do just with a basic systems analysis of how the upgrade cycles for technology are often quite slow. I think that's one of the underlying problems. It's like people only buy cars every, I don't know what it is, 5 to 7 years, and they upgrade their homes on 10-year cycles and et cetera. And some of those points of upgrade it's difficult to intervene because the technology, when someone's water heater goes out, they have to replace their water heater that day. It's not like a month-long investigation reflection process that they do. And so connected to what Zena was saying about adaptation and mitigation, it occurs to me that, not to be uncaring for the folks in LA, but there's going to be a rebuild that happens. And that is a immediate point of intervention in the system to upgrade the stock. Sonoma County lived through that in 2017 with the Tubbs fire, where thousands of structures burned and thousands of structures were then rebuilt. And I know, Pete, you were on that green rebuild group, and many of those groups that were advocating for, like, okay, this is a great opportunity to, all this housing stock is going to get rebuilt. And of course, it'll be rebuilt to a higher building standard that is theoretically better positioned to adapt to future wildfires, et cetera. And can it really hopefully be also more, or even dramatically more, energy efficient in that rebuild process, and maybe not so big and not so, et cetera. I don't know the answer to how that turned out. I know a lot of thousands of those houses got rebuilt, and I don't know if anyone has tracked, like, how much more efficient did they actually get? How much more did everyone really upgrade to not just the minimum building code standard of what's required for fire hardening? Did people really do that? Or when I was looking at that, I was like, if this was me, I would be not just like, oh, I want to meet the minimum. I want to be like a few ranks above that. So build my more impregnable, hardened fortress of a home, or whatever it might be. I'm joking about that part a little bit. And I'm curious for that. And part of it, the way I think it's relevant, is because those points of intervening seem really relevant to me. Like, these are like $1 million rebuilds, multi-million-dollar rebuilds that are going to happen. And hopefully there will be a lot of thoughtfulness in that. And that seems like a point at which intervention could happen. This is relevant to LA, but I think possibly a way in which Sonoma County's experience, having lived through that, not just in 17, but in 20, et cetera, the glass fire and others. Do we know how that did, and how did people, did they really fully upgrade? And if so, is there any learning that could come out of that, and another way in which Sonoma County could provide leadership to the state and the world in that? So I don't know if that made sense, but I think it did.
Quick response. I was just telling Andy on the drive up here. I remember at that time, a number of us came up with a list of constructive suggestions of how neighborhoods and homes could be rebuilt in a better way. And I remember we were told in very clear, certain terms, do not look upon this as an opportunity.
Yes, I remember
These
that.
poor people lost everything. We have to do everything we can to get them back in their homes as quickly as possible.
Right. And that I remember that conversations too. And that always, later I was like, this is really like, we should talk to some professional psychologist or something, like, to how to remedy that, because this is a problem not just here in post-fire, but I mean,
like on the Outer Banks in North Carolina, I don't know how many times those homes have been rebuilt. And that same little thing gets it. You can't mess with the trauma these folks are in because they lost their house. And of course, they have to rebuild their house. I'm like, okay, but I don't know if we really have to do that, do we? Isn't there a way to talk to that, how to frame that? Like, this is a horrible trauma you just went through. And here's how something could be done better.
It's I mean, this is the climate activist in me looking at the destruction of the biggest homes in Los Angeles, thinking, I wonder what energy savings we are getting from that. Because
Yeah.
you know, what's the grid look like? Because we were always trying to think about what the grid balance, and if you did a whole bunch of energy efficiency over here, what's it mean for the load over here? And so it's, and like Pete said, everybody's always like, don't make this a political moment, you know? But I really love your idea about how can Sonoma provide leadership in this moment.
Well, let me just,
We went through this.
yeah, let me put the point on that. Like, do we have access to information regarding any upgrades that happened during the rebuild? I mean, I remember that cautioning that happened, but then also there was a lot of information that went out. They said, hey, you know, it would be cool if people thought about this. And did they do that or not? I mean, of course, they had to meet the minimum of the building code at the time, which was higher than when they built. And obviously there were lighting upgrades and et cetera, et cetera. There were a lot of things that did have to happen.
Well, we
but
could check the before and after energy use and
Yeah,
water
there
use to see if it went down.
Yeah, that's
And-
possible.
And like once everything got rebuilt, I'm sure people have those. You all know this better than we do.
I don't, there's data privacy, so we don't have energy data on
But you can look at the aggregate.
homes or, yeah.
Yeah.
So it would be a good question for BC. I mean, I don't think the building energy went down that significantly, but it's something that we could look at, for sure.
No, it's great.
GIS involved with the fire.
Yeah.
But we still haven't rebuilt everything, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Where are we at? 80%?
I was gonna add, I believe Sonoma Clean Power had what did they call it? Their advanced rebuild, BC, you probably know, where they did provide funding for folks to rebuild their homes to a higher standard. So they might have some data in terms of
And
how
there
many
were
people
some-
took advantage of that program or what.
Yeah, there were some really beautiful examples of people who rebuilt to a
Yeah.
much higher. Yeah, I remember that.
So we'll do, we got Tom, Zeno, and then I think in the interest of time, okay, so we'll keep them short. And then before we end, just next steps on this, we're thinking, you know, I don't know if you guys wanna, you know, compile that feedback or what the plan is, cause I mean, we're here to help coordinate this discussion, or if we wanna, you know, potentially have another discussion item at the next meeting on this to see.
That'd be good.
Okay,
Yeah, and then I would also add, I think in the meantime, RCPA staff, we can reach out to our, colleagues at other jurisdictions and get a sense for what are their current plans around outreach and education. Do they see opportunities for leverage? And so we could do that homework on our end as well, to get a better sense across Sonoma County, what jurisdictions are planning or would like to do around outreach, and if they'd be interested in a more coordinated approach.
And would it be possible, you know, given the water board question, for a utility to chime in and help with transportation? You know what I mean?
I don't know. It's a good.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's the question.
Are there forgive my ignorance, are there a series of like RCPAs, like to where you don't have to go to 70 cities? You could just like, no, okay.
There's one.
We're
One
leader.
RCPA. That's all you get.
For
We're gonna
Sonoma
go-
County, yeah.
we'll do Tom, Zeno, and Nick. Go.
Thank you. Good question about, Sonoma County's experience post 2017 and 2020 fires. And Tanya, thanks for bringing up Sonoma Clean Power's program. Remember what happened in, Sonoma Clean Power had been growing its reserves and developing its capacity to implement programs locally. And they did have plans to do widespread existing building efficiency and decarbonization improvements. The fires hit, and a lot of that effort was redirected to the rebuild and new construction. If you then, we do have data. We can go back and look at the fraction of homes that were rebuilt to that above and beyond code level, right? It was not a huge fraction of the homes, as I recall. It was in the 10% range, as I recall. I could be wrong. It's a long time. So, but also remember that we were one of the first communities to experience a tragic loss at that scale. And we were early on, so therefore we were early in the curve. Our experience in Sonoma County, I think, should be extremely relevant to what they're going to be going through over the next couple of years in LA. So we did lose population. I don't believe we've rebuilt the building stock. We may be getting back close to where the building stock was in 2017, but we've certainly got less population. Makes me think, however, Andy's story, Andy relocated from Topanga Canyon here out of a sense of preparedness. That's going to be a theme. And this theme of having communities experience these losses, go through some level of rebuilding, and I'm afraid to say in Fountain Grove, we're likely to see another experiment of how successful that rebuilding was. We haven't had it yet. We did almost, I think we had it with, was it the glass fire? I forget the names of the fires and exactly where their scars are, but we're going to see this repeated. So we need to learn to, if we are going to rebuild in places, we are going to learn to need to rebuild in methods that are going to be truly resilient, not to fall to that argument that Pete heard in our early cycle. We can't do anything beyond the minimum because the tragedy is so great. It is more tragic to force people to experience this multiple times. Not just for the people whose homes are lost, but for those of us who are in the community witnessing it all happening again. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Tom. Zeno, did you have a?
Yeah, I had a question about SMART. So SMART is a diesel train, right? So it has somewhat of a mixed image problem. The marginal greenhouse gases of an extra passenger are negligible, but the train itself, it has a fixed greenhouse gas emission. So my question is really about what is the capacity of SMART? What is the maximum capacity of a SMART? Because it's a one-track rail, right? And you can only put so many trains on it. So I'm interested in that question. How far can a transportation strategy in Sonoma County depend on building out SMART if we accept that there is a one-track limited size of the train, where they have to park and that. So before you start promoting SMART, I think you need to have those kind of technical questions.
The maybe I didn't describe it well. The intention of the kind of education thing was to look at the whole transportation system, from bikes to SMART to like, how does the whole thing interact together so that people understand the whole system and exactly what you're saying. If you can't use the train, which is super useful for, like, my wife jumps on the train and it dumps her out right by her office, super useful. But for somebody whose office isn't a block away from a SMART station, how useful is it? But if you use a bicycle, or if you walk, or if you, the goal is to get people out of their vehicles, their single person vehicles, and reduce vehicle miles traveled and reduce fossil fuel use and reduce emissions. So yeah, it's part of the whole conversation, for sure.
The state is based on electrification of cars, right, and green electricity. And I think if you see how many people travel on 111, how many people can take SMART maximum, it's just a small fraction of that. So
I agree.
you need to start depending on this idea of electrification.
Mm-hmm.
And are we on track in meeting our climate goal just by the present policy around electrification? I mean, I did some looking into this. There's a database of DMV, you can like see what cars are being sold when, and you can kind of see that the trajectory that we're on, we're never getting there by the present replacement of existing fleet by electric cars. So we need to, that's the big chunk of the car that will remain. So I don't see any way to not do that in this particular environment that we're living in. In Amsterdam, I'm from Amsterdam. In Amsterdam, you can do it, right? Because it's dense.
It's flat.
Small streets and people are used to biking. But in Sonoma County, cars will remain important. Right? So, anyhow, I know that.
No, I agree. And that's part of the whole, like, how do we look at the whole system in a different way?
Comment from Nick, and then I think we're gonna wrap up this discussion and just do some last little RCPA updates. So go ahead, Nick, you have the floor.
Thank you, Pete and Andy, for the work that you put into that. I think that Civic Pride Days are a great idea. Just personally, Monterey Rec and Parks would be willing and able to participate. We're already kind of on that trajectory, and this would fit in well with that. I think that one of the biggest successes of the oil industry from their perspective, one of their biggest wins in protecting their profits has been preventing the population from imagining, has been painting a future of cars and oil extraction and environmental destruction as a bad thing, but as the inescapable future. And that's how you get the climate doomsaying narrative that we have that dominates the discussion of climate in the general media. Because we don't know how to imagine anything else. We want something else. We accept that there is a climate crisis and a biodiversity crisis and lots of other crises, but that's where it stops. We're upset, we're sad, we're scared, we're anxious, and that's where it stops. We don't imagine any way out of it. We don't talk about it. We don't think about what could be different in our society by and large. And so I think that any public messaging campaign should prioritize changing that narrative and should prioritize imagining different futures, painting explicit pictures of what a sustainable transportation system might look like. And the important and the difficult part there is that it might look like anything. That's the issue. How do you present the totality of the possible futures from this point? So, but presenting a diversity of options for climate futures that we could work towards, whether it's about transportation or food or energy or whatever, construction, building. And in line with that, I would also say that any public messaging campaign should be as radical as possible. People are sick of this climate narrative that we have in the media. They're sick of the watered down solutions that have been presented and the watered down results that we've gotten thus far. I think it should be as radical as possible. I think that this media campaign should talk to people doing prescribed burning around Sonoma County. I think that you should talk to the Newt Brigade. Talk to Solar Punk Farms in Guerneville, just one group that I know of. Go as radical as possible, and help us imagine a different future.
One comment, we heard last night, Cool Petaluma is doing a book club around a book called What If We Get It Right?
I'm reading that right now.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So thank you all for the discussion. Do you guys want to report out on that next meeting and just kind of incorporate this, and we'll check in on the process? Excellent.
And while you're all checking in with other agencies, we'll do the same. With this, see what the feedback is. And I already sent this to Jeff at Sonoma Clean Power, so he was wondering how this would go.
Cool. Excellent. So I know we're running into time here, but wanted to get a brief RCPA update on activities. Not sure.
Just a quick thank you to everybody for the really great conversation.
So are we not doing that number 5? Or?
That was it.
That's what we're doing.
That was 5.
Or it's okay?
That was 5. Yeah. This was the Andy and Pete show.
Well, I didn't recognize that. I thought.
It was very jargony. I apologize. Oh, it's got my name on it, but I was just introducing it.
Okay.
But I'll turn it over to BC and Anna.
Sure. Tanya, do you want to say, okay, no, I will go ahead and start in since we're short on time. There were just 3 updates I wanted to give to this group. First on buildings, one on transportation, and then adaptation had come up several times in the meeting, and so I wanted to touch on that. First, on building electrification, wanted to just thank this committee for the input you gave at last meeting on the report I'm working on, the Equitable Building Electrification Action Plan. I've gotten input from this group, and we've had 2 meetings of our staff advisory group. I'm working on a draft document, and I expect to be back to present at the March meeting here to provide input into the document prior to our April meeting for the board, responding to Zeno's comment earlier about just the sequencing of meetings. I want to make sure I got a good set of input, one more set of input here before I presented anything to our board of directors. So working on that report and building a lot of the actions that will be in that report, using the work that Anna and I are doing on studying the existing climate action plans from the jurisdictions to kind of build that report from the ground up, so it not just looks at the regional countywide view down, but also kind of meeting the goals of the individual jurisdictions. So that's my current work on kind of in the building sphere. On transportation, I just wanted to mention that we are continuing to meet with representatives from Sonoma Clean Power and from the County of Sonoma on kind of EV charging station funding and installations. So that is work that is ongoing, as well as internally here with the organization. Obviously, we're focused on climate, but we work very closely with our colleagues at SCTA on the transportation side. And so working more closely and hoping to really integrate our work or assist their work on the comprehensive transportation plan update and the work that's going on the active transportation plan and the implementation efforts of that. So really kind of looking to bridge the 2 sides between kind of the climate side and the transportation side. And then the last one I wanted to mention briefly on the adaptation issues is RCPA has been invited to sit as a member of the local hazard mitigation plan working group. At the countywide level, there's a local hazard mitigation plan that is being developed or updated for the first time in 5 years. This includes all local jurisdictions, all the cities, the county, and the town of Windsor. It includes both of the resource conservation districts, Sonoma Water, Ag and Open Space District, the JC, 8 different local fire districts, and a public utility district, all looking at climate impacts across Sonoma County at a cross-jurisdictional level. The planning effort will be looking at dam failure, drought, earthquakes, extreme cold, extreme heat, extreme wind, flooding, landslides, sea level rise, tsunami, and wildfire. And so the adaptation, so yeah, a nice list of lightweight topics there for us to dig into. But I just want to acknowledge that because of our staff capacity, we have been less active on climate adaptation than I think we would really like to be. And I'm really hoping that this planning effort will kind of integrate us into that world a little bit more, and that we'll be able to use this work to really, that comes out of this updated plan to really guide where our efforts are over the upcoming year. So those are 3 updates from me. And I guess before I pass it to Anna, I just wanted to also thank Andy and Pete for the proposal. I think there's a lot of potential there, and very interested to kind of see where that goes. And I will, I think, check in with you both directly kind of with kind of some of my thoughts. So very good. Thanks. Pass it to Anna for a little bit of an update.
Wonderful. So a few quick Bay Run updates for you from an outreach and education standpoint, and kind of along the lines of what you raised, Tyler. I do distribute a Bay Run toolkit to each of the jurisdictions and their staff. And like you mentioned, that information is provided monthly to staff, but sometimes it doesn't fit in with their campaign for a city newsletter, for example. Knowing that you all have strong connections to your community, I'd love to partner. I'm going to be continuing the conversation with staff. If you have any insights on other avenues to get that information out, please let me know. If there's a newsletter that you're aware of, I'd love to be able to tap into that channel as well, to expand our Bay Run outreach network for that. And speaking of that, we do have some upcoming outreach events for Bay Run. We're going to have a series of residential educational webinars beginning mid-February, and that'll probably run for about a month, once a week. So we'll have more information on dates, but just to let you know, that's coming soon. And then we're planning on having our residential workshops in partnership with the regional libraries starting mid-April, and that'll probably go to the beginning of summer for those. We'll be coordinating directly with the libraries on that, but if, for example, one of the library branches is under construction, which is the case for a few jurisdictions, we'll be touching base with staff to identify some locations that may be better suited for the community at that time. And specifically, we're hoping to pivot some of our locations we have for our Spanish-speaking workshops. This past year, we did have a handful of them at the regional libraries, but we think there may be better locations to improve attendance, and also just maybe a more welcoming spot for some of those community members. So again, would love to tap into your local and community knowledge if you have any suggestions on ways to improve participation and boost our messages that we have for that. I think that's it for me for now. I'll be keeping you all in the loop. Move this up a little bit. At a future CAAC presentation, I would love to provide you an update on our new single-family Ease Home program. The launch has been pushed back a little later for that, so we're expecting it to roll out the beginning of summer this year, but hoping to get informational briefing to you all on that at an upcoming meeting.
Thank you very much. And I see Tom has one last comment. Why don't you go ahead and do that, and then we will adjourn.
Thanks. 2 quick questions for the great team at RCPA. The status of the region-wide building stock survey that I'm anticipating will be coming out this quarter, and any information on contractor networks that we might be able to leverage here in the city of Sonoma.
I can start off with the existing building stock study that Bay Run's leading through its codes and standards program. Currently, that's available in a draft format. We did contact jurisdiction staff to provide their feedback, take a look at that data, and make sure that the dashboard that's available provides the data that they would need. So we're currently waiting on feedback from that. So that's still in a development stage, and I believe it's available on Bay Run's website. If you'd like to take a look, I can pass along the link for that, but definitely not in its final phase right now, still undergoing feedback for that. And then for the contractor network, I did see that City of Sonoma has a contractors corner section on their website. So we've been chatting, and maybe we'll touch base again with Jennifer on resources to provide for that. Through our Bayron multifamily program, or BAMBI, we do offer contractor trainings on select equipment. I believe for 2025, we're likely going to be hosting those in the fall, but may have some additional trainings that are available early in the year. So I can provide you some more direct follow-up on that if you're interested.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. And in terms of final announcements, just 2 reminders. We will be doing the chair and vice chair vote at the next meeting. Also take snacks for the road if you'd like. So with that, we will go ahead and adjourn. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh. All right, you watch out, Pat. It's coming for you. Appreciate the, I'm tired. Yeah. I had one.